We get on the phone with this client and they say, like, as if we had just murdered their dog. There's a new sheriff in town. We are extremely concerned about how things have been going, to the extent where they made it seem as if they were going to take us to court to sue us for damages.
It was my absolute pleasure to have Patrick Gilbert, the CEO of Adventure Media, on this channel. And in this interview, we spoke about how growth hacking through targeting specific keyword searches, which was the foundation for digital marketing for so long, may not actually be the best practice, and how he's noticing that digital marketing, especially Google Ads, is really going back into the core foundations of marketing principles. We also go through and discuss the pitfalls of ROAS and how to survive in this new age of digital marketing. Plus, we even also discuss the juicy subject of why offering free audits is not actually healthy for the industry. So why don't you sit down, relax, grab a cup of coffee as we go through this wide-ranging interview of the state of digital marketing, especially Google Ads, with Patrick Gilbert. All right, welcome back. And today I've got the absolute pleasure of having Patrick, who is the CEO of Adventure Media. Patrick, it's amazing to have you here. So firstly, thank you for joining me.
Thanks for having me, Aaron.
So no, my pleasure. Hey, the reason why I wanted to get you on is, obviously, if people don't know who Patrick is, he's been the CEO. He's the CEO of Adventure Media, obviously with Isaac, and he's been involved in this whole digital marketing space for well over a decade now. One of the things I want to talk to you about, and I think this is a really good starting point, especially inside of Google Ads, we can get caught up with things like ROAS and cost, target CPAs and cost per conversion. And I want to get your take on this, because I feel like there's been a real shift recently that the real strategy and success for Google Ads is actually outside of the Google Ads dashboard. So I'd like to get your view on that and just your perspective on how you've noticed things change.
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head. So I think when I started doing this, I guess even a little bit more of a background, I studied marketing in college and came into this industry bright-eyed, bushy-tailed, and then started doing digital marketing and realized that it didn't feel at all like marketing. So, we're talking about like the 2010s, like the entire model was growth hacks, best practices, and essentially fighting over what we would describe as like arbitrage traffic. So I think like my entire job for, I don't know, let's call it like the first 8 years that I was in the space was like trying to find low cost opportunities to buy traffic that was underserviced in certain ways and monetize that. And when you're doing that, it's this very like hacky, like growth hacking mindset, secret sauce type stuff, right? The offer doesn't matter. Your creative doesn't matter. Like your landing page could suck. It's really this, like, you're sort of like mining for digital arbitrage and you're exploiting this loophole in the market. And that's essentially what really defined digital marketing for a really long time. And we thought at the time that was like the new way of marketing. And it was, but eventually we would go back to the mean. And I think that some of the stuff that, I had learned growing up and when I studied in university, and like you learn principles that are like stand the test of time about consumer behavior and about like how brands grow and how marketing should be done. And I think we're now getting back to that. I think the pendulum has shifted. So now, right, I think we've graduated from this place of like, there's a certain way to do Google Ads, right? Like when I was growing up, it's like, this is how you set up a campaign. Like this is the settings you choose. These are the settings you don't choose. And if you don't do it this way, you're making a mistake, right? You're doing a disservice to yourself, your clients, whatever it is. You need to know the best way to do this. And now the rallying cry that we have when it comes to client strategy is never, always, never, never, which is like a rallying cry around like there's no right way to do anything. It always depends. And there's always a reason to choose that setting that you mindlessly turn off. And there's always a reason to choose this tactic over that tactic. I wrote a book on using automation and, what we would now just call AI, but like using AI in marketing, right? But you'd be surprised at how often our team does not use AI-driven campaigns for our clients because it's never always the best solution. So I think that like once you kind of get out of the platform and you start thinking about how should this business succeed? And let's identify the larger strategy of the business. And the way that I would think about that is like, where are you going right now, right? Or like what if you don't change much about your business and your marketing ecosystem, where are you going to end up in, 12, 24, 36 months? And you can use forecasting tools to model that out. And it's like, okay, well now where do you want to go? And usually that's better, right? It's like I have goals that are growth oriented. So then you figure out how do you close that delta? And once you start really running the numbers, you realize like you can't just do this by making keyword changes in a Google Ads account. Like real
No.
growth has to be a concerted effort across the business. And you have to have like the 4 P's of marketing really matter, but all these things have to be in sync. So once you have the larger strategy in place of a business and the overall marketing team, then you come down to prescribing what needs to be done at the individual channel level, like Google Ads, for example. So
Yeah.
then you start to understand the practical, oh, we should be using this certain AI bidding tool, or we should be using this creative strategy, or a segmented campaign approach would be more effective than a consolidated approach. And
Yeah.
once you align on the strategy, then the individual tactics that you choose down at the campaign level are almost prescripted by themselves. And that's
Yeah.
been the biggest shift that we've witnessed in the industry over the last couple of years. And that's where we're driving the most success for our campaigns today.
Yeah, I really love that. And one of the things I know personally, I've been quite vocal on is I really hate when someone comes out and says, oh, this is the best strategy for Google Ads, or this is the tactic that works. And I'm, 100% agree with you. Is for me, it's all about, I guess, you can have frameworks. You can definitely have frameworks. You need to know the principles, how each campaign works, how the settings work. But once you know that, it has to come back to how does this work for the business, but more importantly, how does this work for the individual people who's the traffic that you wanted to target? How does that work inside it? How do you work that out for the individual business? Thank you for watching this interview, which is sponsored by Define Digital Academy. When I started Define Digital Academy, it was with the sole purpose of helping as many businesses and Google Ads specialists to see real success with their Google Ads campaigns. And since we launched back in 2022 from really, really humble beginnings, we've had absolutely thousands of businesses and students reach out for help. And we want to continue this going, and we want to serve you the best way possible. And if you want help with your Google Ads campaigns, and this doesn't matter if you are a new beginner looking at starting your very first Google Ads campaign, or if you're a business who is spending thousands of dollars in their Google Ads campaigns every single month and you need some expert guidance, we are here to help. And so that we can give you the best tools, some of them free, some of them paid, to help you grow your business or your client's business with Google Ads, why don't you follow the link in the description below? And in the description, you'll see a link which is called How Can We Help You? If you follow that link, it'll take you through a really, really short 2-minute questionnaire where we can get the right information, whether it's one of our courses, whether it's one of our communities, or whether it's some of our expert boutique coaching and mentoring programs. We've got everything covered, once again, from the beginner to the most experienced, to help you with your Google Ads results. Thank you again. Let's head back to the interview.
Yeah, and I was reading an article earlier today. Eric Seufert runs a site called Mobile Dev Memo, and he said like there's basically 2 ways to approach most digital advertising strategy. There's generally a goal of maximizing budget within a return on ad spend constraint, or there is a maximize return on ad spend within a budget constraint. And of course, there's like flaws to that, and I think that's kind of an incomplete way to really there's a lot of other factors involved there. But I think that's how most campaigns are really run. And it's like, okay, well, what are our guardrails here, right? Like we want to drive the most amount of profitability for our business. But let's be very clear. Are we working with a fixed budget, in which case we want to generate the highest returns with that budget? Or are we working with a really strict return on ad spend or profitability goal? And then we have to figure out how much money can we spend under that. And I would say most businesses, at least that I've worked with, fall into that category where they're like, if we're at this profitability level, we'll spend as much as possible. You have to be much more strategic, because the problem is Google in particular is not a campaign that is run in a silo. I'm going to jump ahead a little bit here, but I know that there's a lot of talk and buzz about what AI is doing to everything, and AI generated overviews, and what does this mean for Google, and what does this mean for search advertising, and what does it mean for SEO? There is a lot of change happening, but I think what's really important to recognize is like, this isn't the first big change. We just haven't noticed the change. Consumer behavior, even on Google, has dramatically shifted and has always been shifting. It has always been on this trend to become much more dynamic and complex. And Google's actually released data on this, and they've shown different trends of different search queries over time. And there was a paper that they published, it's a few years old now, but they showed that for a long time when Google was just released, let's say when it was gaining popularity through, let's say, the early 2000s, it was primarily used as a place where savvy consumers were price shopping. The words related to cheap and best, like cheapest, let's just call it that, right? Best value, things like that, dominated Google search results for any sort of like buying behavior, right? So cheap had its long run. And then at a certain point, the term best became much more popular. So best can mean a lot of different things. It can mean something different to you than it means to me. It's a much more
Yeah.
dynamic, complex modifier within the
Yeah.
semantic search. So what ended up happening is Google started this trend of just being a price comparison shopping tool. And that sort of fell by the wayside, while dynamic terms like best became on the rise. And now what you see in generally in almost any campaign that you look at, the path length and the time lag report is going to have more data points than ever, because the problem is people are doing a search on Google and then they're opening up their Instagram feeds and then they're getting served ads on YouTube through their TV, and they're interacting
Yeah.
with 15 different ads before they even visit that website a second time. And that is just a very, very different ecosystem than what I grew up in doing this work
Yeah.
10 years ago, when the consumer behavior was much more linear and short term.
Yeah.
Everything was about get a very simple landing page and people will just click on your ad and they will call you, right? This was before people were opening up multiple tabs or they were saving things. It was just so
Yeah.
simple. And now that's just not the case. So even before we get into the conversation of like, what does AI overviews mean for all of this? It's like, let's just recognize that all of this has been changing all along. And a
Yeah.
lot of people haven't even caught up to where we should have been for the last 5 years.
I know, like even when you talk about with, what ROAS or what sort of targets the business has. I mean, I'm finding a lot of my discussions now with anyone that we're coaching through Google Ads is we'll break down, where do we get that number from? What are you talking about there? Like, why do you need it at 300? Or why do you need a cost per conversion at $50? Let's walk through those numbers. And the other thing with time is, I know within this brand Define, we've got about a 3 to 4 month window from when they initially join our database to when they actually put some money, actually go through and buy something.
Yeah.
We've just launched a new program and we're signing up guys that have been said, I've been following your stuff for like 2 years. So it's that whole thing of, I think a lot of businesses, especially in this, and a lot of digital marketers, just they get impatience with the time. Like, we see that they clicked on this search term and they've gone to a website. Why haven't they bought yet? And I just know it's a lot more nuanced than that.
Yeah, I think the phrase that people really need to become much more comfortable with, I'm not sure if this is a buzzword, but it should be. But the concept of a leading indicator, I think,
Good.
should replace the concept of like return on ad spend, or at
Yeah.
least in terms of its importance, because leading indicator suggests that we have reason to believe that this action or this model or whatever we have here
Good.
is upstream of profit. So if these criteria are met, we have reason to believe that a certain amount of profitability will come from this, whether it's a month from now, 2 years from now, whatever it might be. And the thing is, with a model like that, you can update it over time. So we work with a lot
Yeah.
of brands that maybe they have a retail location, right? And with a retail location, there's a lot of different ways to convert online. But the problem is, if you're driving someone to a store, it's really difficult in a lot of cases to connect the point of sale back up to a Google ad campaign. So a
Yeah.
lot of times you're looking at multiple different leading indicators, like did they call the store? Did they schedule an appointment? Did they click on a get directions link on Google Maps or Waze? And what you then have to do is like reconcile that with the back end data to understand like in-store close rates and all these other things. And then you update it over time, because those things always change. You can't just
Yeah.
say, oh, well, my average close rate in store is 10%. And then, okay, that's it. We're just going to optimize for that forever. You reassess these things on a recurring basis. And I think like we get so stuck in this mud of like, okay, well, we need to hit a 10 times return on ad spend. And it's like, why?
Yeah.
We did a consulting project for a large mattress brand recently. And they went through their profit margins, very profitable, right? But they had extremely high return on ad spend targets. And it didn't make sense to me. And they said, like, listen, we need to meet this threshold to stay profitable. And I was
Yeah.
like, that doesn't add up to me. Like, you can't tell me you have crazy high profit margins, but you also need to retain this crazy high return on ad spend. Like, that doesn't make sense. Dug into the data and started to realize that like a lot of their sales, they weren't aware of this, but it came from branded search that wasn't incremental.
Yeah.
And in fact, we found that like more than 50% of the branded traffic was not incremental. It's going to happen anyway. And so therefore, because they were spending all this money on traffic that was going to convert anyway, they had to have an extremely high return on ad spend goal. So it was almost like you're trying to solve this problem in the wrong way. Take a step
Yeah.
back and think about setting different goals that better align with the overall business objectives. And then you can start to divide and conquer and really develop a growth oriented campaign here. Because the problem is, the more conservative your return on ad spend goal is, which everybody wants it to be, you're not going to be able to buy as much growth.
Yeah.
So just aligning on that is probably the number one value that I think most freelancers and agencies can bring to their clients, is really challenging the concept of those return on ad spend
Yeah.
goals and framing a much more comprehensive understanding of what's actually driving profitability and growth here.
Have you noticed in your own agency, or if you got any advice for, whether it's a freelancer or agency, whatever the role is, in that communication to clients? Because I've found that that is I guess one of the new skill sets that is required, being able to frame the data and present it to the business in a way that makes sense for them. Because if we're not relying on ROAS, so if they see a ROAS go down, let's just say, for example, 800% to say 350%, what sort of tools are you using there? What sort of communication strategies are you using to educate to the business that this is actually a good thing for your business?
It's a difficult conversation because I think
Yeah.
where we've probably made the mistake in the past is we've been a little too, maybe stubborn is the word, or like you
Yeah.
don't want to go into those conversations and make someone feel stupid,
Yeah.
right? You have to go into them with respect. You have to go into these kinds of conversations with the understanding that the person on the other end knows how to run a business and they know
Yeah.
how profit is calculated. And I think like
Yeah.
if you come in being like, well, do you know that this is like,
Yeah. Yeah.
you're going to lose trust very quickly. And I think just being very delicate in that. But I think what's worked for us is thinking about when we have that conversation and how we structure our services based on that. So
Yeah.
one of the biggest shifts we've made as an agency is that we now consider ourselves to be a strategy first agency. So what that means is we don't necessarily jump in and start managing campaigns right away. And we're not like whatever your short term goals are that you're going to tell us, like in the onboarding stage or whatever, we're going to hear it. But by coming on with us, and we're very clear about this, like we're going to go through an exercise where we're going to like sit down and understand the full goals of the business and
Yeah.
where your forecast is and all these different modifiers here. And we're going to have an honest conversation about what success looks like. And then that's what we're going to start being held accountable to. So what we do is basically tell them like, if you want to work with us, you need to be open to this conversation. And I'll give you a lot of credit, like in that mattress example, like I'll trust you that that makes sense. But I'm going to go back and reverse engineer that and perhaps come back with a different recommendation. Then we're going to
Good.
fully align on what that looks like, and then we're going to set out and go achieve that together. The problem
Yeah.
is what we have experienced, and I'm sure most agencies have experienced at one point, like a client comes to you and honestly, we get form submissions every single day that on our website that look something like this. I'm spending $50,000 a month on Google Ads. I need a 3 times return on ad spend. Can you do it better? And it's
Yeah.
like, first of all, why 50 grand? Why 3 times return on ad spend? And why even Google? Like, why are you even spending money on Google? Like, and I think just challenging those questions, like, and so many people are just like, okay, that's the directive. I'm going to go out and
Yeah.
see if I can get you a 3 times ROAS. It's like, no, you're going to fail. You need to go and you need to have a realistic conversation about what real business goals are. And then you work
Yeah.
backwards. And if you can get that alignment and come to it from a true partnership standpoint, that's where you get full alignment.
A couple of things I want to break out from what you were talking from there is, obviously you've got a really well-known agency, and obviously with yourself, you've got some credentials there that you can actually start making those discussions with businesses.
Mm-hmm.
There's a practice in our industry. I know we were talking off camera. You don't love it. I don't love it either. Of someone coming in, doing a free audit and basically pulling apart what you're doing and just picking holes in your strategy. Especially for an up and coming agency, you may not have the level of credibility to be able to really go, this is what we've achieved. How do you revive that conversation where we're not just talking about we're going to get 3x ROAS? Yeah. How do you operate? How do you communicate that? And how do you fight back against that culture of free audits?
I want to take out a full page ad in every newspaper on this exact. I think that as an industry, we should abolish the free audit because it's either one of two things. Either one, you're giving away too much value for free that you should be charging for.
Yeah.
Or you're providing no value, and that's not an effective way to try and acquire business. And I think it's manipulative to try and use tactics that you often see on these free audits to convince a client that you are the right agency for them. And I think that entire practice is jaded and grimy and unhelpful. And I think
Yeah.
it gets away from trying to provide real value and show why you are a good partner for whatever client you're pitching. And we've experienced this so often, and it's a shame. And it's something that is so incredibly frustrating, and it's so prevalent in this industry. And look, there's a number of different reasons why you lose business or why you lose clients, right?
Yeah.
The number one cause that's never going to go away, even Ogilvy wrote about this in the 60s, is that a new CMO comes in and they put the account up for review. It's really hard. It's like, listen, like when a new CMO comes in or a new leadership team comes in, they're probably going to hire their team. Like they're just going to come
Yeah.
in, they're going to clean house. That's just what happens. It's really hard to retain a business, regardless of how long you work with them, regardless of how great the performance has been. You're probably going to lose that account at some point over the next year. It just happens, and there's nothing we can really do about it. It sucks. The
Yeah.
second thing is when another agency gets an opportunity to provide a free audit. Now, sometimes this comes with a new CMO, and sometimes
Yeah.
it's just like, hey, second set of eyes. Let me get a link to this and whatever. And I'll give you an example of something that happened recently that was really, really. It was kind of a landmark victory for our agency. We
Yeah.
had a longtime client for 5 years, and they're a mid-sized client, and they're in the hardware space. So it's let's call it a commodity type thing, right? You can buy similar products in many other
Yeah.
places. And it's a small business, and they fight for every dollar they have. And I'll save you all the backstory, but they actually did have a leadership change. And so the person who was managing the relationship beforehand didn't have growth mindset. And we went back to him multiple times saying, look, this is the opportunity to increase search impression share and change profitability goals. And we
Yeah.
should be investing in all these different channels. And here's what growth would look like. And they just like, we're never really interested. So now there's new ownership, right? And so they think that the previous person was not doing a great job. So they went out and got an audit from another agency that's been around for a very long time. But then all of a sudden we get on the phone with this client that we've been servicing, and they've experienced what was it? It was 88% revenue growth year over year and
Yeah.
30% increase in overall profitability on the business, despite the fact that they haven't really been giving us a lot of resources to grow. We get on the phone with this client and they say, like, as if we had just murdered their dog.
Yeah.
There's a new sheriff in town. We are extremely concerned about how things have been going, to the extent where they made it seem as if they were going to take us to court to sue us for damages. Because
Yeah.
they went out and they got one of these audits where the entire intention of that audit is to make it look as if whomever is running the campaigns currently is so egregious and absent-minded and running away with your money and wasting all of your money, and you need to fire them immediately and hire us.
Yeah.
Every one of those audits is going through the account looking for the gotcha moment. They're trying to point to
Yeah.
things in the change history tool. They're trying to talk about like obscure things that don't really make any sense, to be manipulative and confusing and really make it seem as if you're doing a bad job. And trust me, every account has something you can point to. Every
Yeah.
account has something that you can go to.
100%. Yep.
And so the client got this audit, and we were like, listen, like, let's take a step back here. Let's go through this. What did they say? We can hit any of these points. We know we're doing really good work for you guys. The performance is there, yada, yada, yada. And they kind of cooled down a little bit. They started to listen to some of our responses, and they're like, oh, it's actually kind of interesting. I didn't really know about that. Okay, it seems like there was a strategy in place, all these different things. They ended up putting us on a call with this other agency and let us debate it. And it was one of the most surreal experiences of my career.
Dude.
Because we had this very heated debate about like this manipulative type of sales audit, and us defending our work about all what we know about the business and what we know about these kinds of buyers, that they click on these ads, but they add these kinds of items to their shopping cart, and this is what generates repeat business, and this is all these different dynamics, right? They didn't have any of that. We ended up saving the business. And we won the debate, so to speak, and now we're kind of back on a growth trajectory with this client. That was a really big moment for us, because we've had so many instances in the past where we've been fired in that moment. And in this case, because this client had the humility and I guess the sense of humor to say, let me just put these two agencies on a call and let them have it out, we emerged and we were able to stick it in the face of that manipulative audit. But I think like what it really comes down to is it's not just that's a bad practice. It's like, if you are actually giving value away during the audit process, you should be charging for it. And I think what would be better is if we got rid of the free audit entirely, and as an industry just said, you know what, we're going to charge people a nominal fee for a 1-month consultation. And we'll hand them a strategy or a framework or how we work together, whatever it is. We're not going to hold them anything beyond that month. They want to continue working with us, great. If not, they can go elsewhere. I think that would be such a better version of courting new business for everybody. But unfortunately, we're stuck in this way where we're trying to tell people, oh, this agency's not making changes in this ad group,
Yeah.
so you have to fire them.
I was just nodding along the whole thing. I mean, I didn't get the chance for the one-on-one battle, which I would have loved. But, and I'm sure anyone who's had been in the industry for 5 years have had this happen. And that's where I know what I've learned, where we, in the case where we lost a client, is just the thing that I was frustrated about, because I felt like we'd spoken about this all the time with the client about this is why this is set. This is how it's set this way. This is what's done from here. This is what we're looking at achieving. And then, yeah, you're right. I guarantee you right now, I could step into, I wouldn't want to do this, step into any account that your agency is running and go, oh, that, and manipulate it. And you could do the same on mine. And,
that would be good content. Maybe we should do that.
Would be. We probably should. We could. But that's where I go. My biggest message, and I think this is a great practice for a business owner. If you don't understand what's happening inside of your Google Ads account, a great way of being able to check is your agency across your strategy and what they're doing is to organize a meeting with your, and we're talking just about in Google Ads, organize a meeting with your digital agency and go, all right, can you talk me through every single campaign that we've got and every single setting that we've got inside of Google Ads, and let me know why we've got it this way. And as a business owner, that's a really, really good way to go, okay, do these guys know what this align? And then on the flip side, as an agency, if you're taking on an account which got running Google Ads, that's the first place I start. I go, right, let's go inside of your Google Ads. Second place, because I'll go through business goals first. But when we're talking in terms of Google Ads, I'm going, walk me through this. Why do you have this search campaign? Why do you have this Performance Max campaign? Why do you have these 6 video campaigns? Whatever the situation is, because that tells you a lot about who's been running the account. Have they actually put critical thought and strategy to how it aligns to the business?
Yeah, and I think on either side of that, when there's no trust, it's immediately defensive.
Yeah.
And that's where things get very difficult very quickly. And you need to diffuse the situation. Like there's a great book written, I don't know, 2007 maybe, called Marketing in the Era of Accountability, where it talks about how there's a friction in all of marketing and has existed forever, long before digital, that there's a friction between effectiveness, which is doing the right thing for the business, and accountability, which is being seen to do the right thing. And I think that if I was put in that situation, you would recognize like, I actually don't know why I chose that setting. But the moment you and it's like a massive campaign with a million different settings, and you might not have great answers to all of it. You're like, it just kind of was that way from when I inherited it, and we just kind of kept doing it. Now, of course, you would have a larger strategy across, but like there's always going to be nuances like that. Yeah. And I think at times you have to have the humility to say like, yeah, it's a good point. I should change that without like necessarily knowing with confidence you're going to get fired. And I don't really have an answer to how you build that trust, particularly if like, things are hitting the fan and whatever else. But I think that's really where a lot of the friction is. It's like you want to be able to showcase strategy and have answers to all these things. But if it's under the lens of like someone just provided a gotcha audit, then you're sort of setting everyone up for failure.
Yeah, no. And I also, too, the other thing I don't like about the gotcha audit as well is that at its core, a lot of the times it doesn't have the actual business's heart in its best interests. It's actually more about, I just want to sign you as a client.
Yeah.
And rather the thing would be is if you do the audit and you go, look, this agency is doing a great job. Hey, I'm here if you want to change, but ultimately they're doing, they are doing well. And I know that doesn't sell with conversion rates, but
well, I'll tell you, listen, we do that because maybe we're in a different place and we have the ability to do this. But like there are plenty of times where we look at an account and we say, okay, look, this is where the strategy first piece comes into it, because I don't want to sit here all the time and promise you I can make a bunch of improvements over the first month or 3 months. And I think that is so important for you to iron out ahead of time. So what we realistically do is, people on our sales team can do this, but like really once you start working with the team, we're going to be very clear up front about like how much, let's call it like quick wins, like how much like short-term impact we can make. And look, there are tons of times where we inherit accounts where like it is a complete mess and we can make some like massive impact by changing a few things. But the reality is most accounts are following a lot of like, let's call it best practices, right? They're doing a lot of the things right. They're just not growing. So like, I'm not going to come in here and say, oh, you're at a 3 times return on ad spend, we can get you to a 6. Don't worry. Yeah. Because we're not going to be able to. And then they're going to leave in 4 months. And now we're in a terrible spot as a company. So what we
Yeah.
try and do then is like, okay, listen, like we're going to make some changes here. We're going to create a framework for testing new creatives or implementing growth strategies, whatever it is. But then we're going to create a roadmap and we're going to work
Yeah.
toward that over time. And here's the measurement protocol we're going to put in place. And you really build that. And once you set expectations of like things are kind of good right now, let's build this out over the long term, you actually generate a much better client relationship as opposed to over promising that you can double their return on ad spend in the first 3 months. That's just
Yeah.
not a winning formula to building an agency. Like I promise you, we tried it. It doesn't work.
Yeah, we're doing a thing with onboarding businesses into our programs now, where we do we call it an arbitrage. So we basically do
Yeah.
a triage system, where and it's simply it's 3 colors. So we go, green. This is the parts of your account or strategy which are great. We're not going to touch that. We may increase some budgets, we may tinker some new creators, but in terms of that part of it is working really, really well. Then we go to the amber, which is working with the traffic light system. And this is stuff that, hey, look, we need to work on this, but some of this may not even be just 6 to 12 months from now. But
Yeah.
we're just highlighting it now, going, this is in the long-term framework of what we need to do. Maybe we need to start it evolving into video or whatever the situation may be. And then we have the red light. These are the things where we go, we need to, this is the urgent things that we need to fix that we think will get quick wins. A lot of times what we're finding, the category that has the least amount of items is actually the red light.
Yeah. Because you know what?
And
And that's what's made everything so much more difficult, right? Like there's a
yeah,
lot of like, Fred Valley's it just talked about it, like how the work is harder now. It's harder to
yeah,
be doing like providing services in this industry than it was because of that specific thing. Like there's not as many red lights where it's like, oh, I know how to fix this. Like let me just
yeah,
turn that off, turn this on, whatever. And that makes it much more challenging because it's like, well, where do I provide value? And it's like, well, you have to
yeah,
develop a real marketing program. And that's not the
yeah,
easiest thing to do. There's a reason people like us exist because this work is hard. If it was
yeah,
as easy as people make it want, as some people make it out to be, then you and I would not have a job. We wouldn't be in
yeah,
business.
yeah, 100% agree. Hey, I want to finish with this, and I really, really appreciate our conversation. I can see, and you can hold it up there. You've got many people may not know Patrick's book. We are going to put a link in the description below as to where you can get this, Join or Die. Can you just give me a summation of that book? And, obviously it talks a lot about AI and automation of practices, and just the take-home message for listeners on, what do you think is the greatest truth that you're still living today out of that book?
Thank you. I appreciate it. So the book was published in 2020, and I like to think it's still
Which is a
relevant.
long time ago now in
A
our
long time
industry.
ago, right? So
Yeah.
so the reason I wrote the book, and this is what I'll come back to as far as like what I think is still the key learning, is
Yeah.
the industry at the time was like still fighting back against AI. And
Yeah.
so I started writing about Google automation or AI, whatever, in 2018. And my take on it was like, other agencies and freelancers and my clients specifically would be like, automation's bad. It's just Google trying to
Yeah.
spend more of your money. It's, whatever. And I like got very curious about it and learned about it and was like, no, I think this AI thing could be really good for like performance. Let's learn more about it. I felt that people were so quick to shut it off, probably because of insecurity and fear. Like this is going to come take my job, so I can't go all into it. And so we leaned into it as an agency. We learned a lot about it, and I was like, no, this is great. So I started publishing some content on it. Started going on a speaking tour around the world. Google was finally like, this guy's talking good things. Let's put him on a plane and have him talk all over the place
Yeah.
about how great AI is. So then I eventually published the book on it. The whole point of the book is to really frame how the technology works. And a lot of it is focused on bidding, but it's the
Yeah.
same principles that now apply to audience targeting and the same thing that applies to creative matching. Because once you understand the complex dynamics of like how any sort of like platform specific algorithm works, then it's just like, oh, now it makes sense to me why this creative would start to win, even though it might not even make total sense, right? Once you understand that
Yeah.
there's like two conflicting axes here of like the confidence of an AI algorithm and also the accuracy of an AI algorithm, right? There's like two different things working in once. So now
Yeah.
you know how to like create better data infrastructures and testing protocols and all these different things. And I think that like some of these principles of like how to work with AI within your platforms is so incredibly important, right? Like I think it is very hard to get started in this industry today. I think I was very lucky to get started when I
Yeah.
did, because all of a sudden it was like, you read Brad Geddes and you read Perry Marshall and a couple of these other books. And it was like, all right, now I understand like the very nuanced, like every lever that you can pull. And all the data was there and the search term data was there. And I think it was very simple to be able to do that. Now
Yeah.
the modern marketer has to know all that stuff, but they don't have the access to the data and they need to figure out how to manipulate an AI algorithm that's constantly changing. And I think that's a
Yeah.
really, really difficult thing. So I think learning how the technology works is such a fundamental, important, like helpful thing that can be helpful for everything. But I think my real mentality here, my still biggest takeaway from this book goes back to the very beginning of like when you have something that is new and scary, we are all a little too quick to make up our mind about it. Whether it's
Yeah.
AI generated overviews or if it's, how ChatGPT is going to change Google search or all these different things. And my general recommendation is lean in with optimism and patience. Like there's a lot of pressure on marketers always, but specifically over the last couple of years about what's happening with this AI stuff and how should we be changing our
Yeah.
campaigns and what should be our message to our clients and our customers. And there puts a lot of pressure on marketers to like wake up tomorrow and be the subject matter expert. And I would just
Yeah.
challenge you to really be patient when you can and explore these new technologies with a real open mind and be curious and don't rush to be a subject matter expert tomorrow. It's going to take a while.
Yeah.
And whether it was adopting automated bidding in 2020 or embracing generative AI in creative today, I think that if you really come to this with a childlike mentality of curiosity, that is how you will truly learn and embrace it and truly become a subject matter expert.
Hey, Patrick, it's been an absolute pleasure having you here. Thank you for coming on and sharing your knowledge. For everyone watching or listening to this, just go into the show notes, the description. I'm going to show you where you can get in contact with Patrick and also where you can get his book. So thanks a lot.
Thank you, Aaron. It was a pleasure.